Hey guys, it's heyybritny and welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, I'm going to be doing a episode for my Binge Watch Britney podcast series. We're going to be covering Blood of Blood, the Outlander spinoff. Alrighty, so I'm very excited to be doing this episode. I've watched all 7 seasons of Outlander, so I'm pretty much up to date on everything that has happened. However, I have not read the book, so I don't know anything outside of a TV show. Being that I am up to date through season 7 of Outlander, this episode may have some spoilers, so please keep that in mind as you continue watching. Now, in terms of Outlander, we do have like the younger versions of characters from Outlander in Blood of Blood, so it was really nice to see people like Jocasta, Ned, and Murtaugh, if I'm saying his name correctly. I can't quite hear how it's pronounced, so I think it's Murtaugh. But yeah, so it was really cool to see all of those people. I do have to point out that Brian's dad, Lord Lovett, he is absolutely creepy. I do not like him, and I'm surprised that we have that type of character for the Fraser family. I don't really know their whole backstory, so that would be interesting to kind of learn more because, again, I have not read the book, so I only know what I can remember of what was presented in Outlander. Alrighty, so with all of that being said, let's get into the rest of the episode. Okay, so I have 5 key moments. So in this episode, we are only covering episodes 1 through 3. I did watch the first episode. I started some of the second, and then I took maybe a week to get back to the beginning of episode 2. And then I watched episodes 2 and 3 last night, and they were really good. And I really wanted to come on and do this episode. So let's talk about our first key moment. So the MacKenzie clan needs a new laird. What this means is that Red Jacob, who was the laird of the clan, he has passed away, and so now they need somebody else to kind of step in and lead the MacKenzie clan. And so the MacKenzies, they really need to stay in power. They are really fighting for survival right now because whoever the new laird is, if it's not someone from their family, you typically have someone come in power and they get rid of their enemies. So they are trying to avoid being eliminated if somebody else is put in charge of a clan. So we have this gathering for the clan, and this is basically where all of the families show up and they are celebrating. They're also advocating for whoever they think the new laird should be. And this is where we have Brian showing up, and he's not really supposed to be there. His dad, Lord Lovett, is basically shunned from society. I don't know all of the backstory, and they kind of talked about it, but they didn't go into detail. I don't know what exactly he did to get shunned from good society. So Brian shows up, and he's not really supposed to be there, but people don't know what he looks like, and that's really crazy because we live in the time of having photographs, of having the internet, so you can more easily find out who someone is. And so Brian shows up at this gathering. He is supposed to be able to skate under the radar because people don't know what he looks like. They don't know what family he's from. And we see him kind of walking around, and he has dark hair. He's dressed like everybody else, but I guess his features stand out and make him more noticeable as not being part of a family in the clan. And so there's this group of guys who take an interest in him, and they're literally trying to like find him and chase him and all of that stuff. He's able to get away, and he runs up meeting Ellen, who is the oldest daughter, I think, of the MacKenzie clan, or the MacKenzie family rather. She's unmarried and she's more academic. She likes to read, she likes to learn about things, and so she's basically, of the children of Red Jacob's children, she is more positioned to be the next laird, but she cannot be because she is a woman. And so anyway, she ends up meeting Brian because they're both kind of like hanging out in this like barn type of area. She's just there to relax and get away from all of the hustle and bustle, and then he is actually running away from people who are chasing him. And so they meet, and it's completely an accident. And what I really love about this is that Brian is listening to Murtaugh talk about like how he wants to meet Ellen, he wants to woo her, and then Brian just accidentally meets her, and then they basically fall in love at first sight. And I thought it was really funny that he's like obviously trying to run away from people. She doesn't know why he's trying to run away, and then he's like, hey, can you meet me later, blah blah blah, and she agrees to sneak off and meet him. And that's when they really find out, hey, we are from 2 different families who are actually feuding. How is this going to work? And so now let's talk about the families feuding. So with the MacKenzie family, we have 2 sons. We have Colum and we have Dougal. And I remember hearing of Dougal from Outlander, but I can't remember everything about him. I believe he is the father of the guy who is dating Jamie's daughter or married to Jamie's daughter in Outlander. I can't remember his name, but I think that that's his father and that's his family line. Now, in terms of the two sons, so we have Colm and Dougal. Colm, he gives me King Joffrey vibes from Game of Thrones. I do not like him. He seems like he is going to do bad stuff just because he can. And then Dougal is more of a brute. He's more war driven. He leads through action, whereas Colm is going to lead through words and diplomacy and pens and all of that stuff. Dougal is going to lead with his weapons, with his sword, whatever he has to defend himself and cause chaos. And the other thing that we need to know about Colm is that he is crippled. He does have a leg injury, and we find out that this happened because they were going on a raid and Dougal got sidetracked and he wanted to basically kill two birds with one stone, and he led the raid party away from what they were supposed to be doing, and this led to Colm being basically knocked off of his horse and he had a leg injury. This was made worse because the father, Red Jacob, he was very strict with his sons and he was very stern, and he wanted them to be presented a certain way, and he was really trying to drill this into them, but they were not listening, and they both had their individual personalities that made them not well suited to be the next Laird, and he was really trying to get them ready for this position. And so we had this scene where the father, Red Jacob, he is basically scolding Colm because he's still in bed recovering from his leg injury, and this doesn't turn out well, and so Colm really wants to prove himself to his dad. So he tells him, hey, it's Dougal's fault that this happened. The men followed him, and so the dad's like, oh, so they didn't trust you to leave the party? Is that what you're telling me? And so basically he's making it worse for himself. Like, he's explaining what happened, but his father's losing respect for him because of how everything played out. And so we see this moment where Colm is realizing, like, hey, this is really bad, and he prematurely gets out of bed. He's hobbling, trying to chase his father and earn his respect again, and he ends up falling again, and we can see the bone sticking out of his leg. And how do you heal the bone in that time when you don't have the same medical care and advancement that we have today? And so he is now hobbled. He can't fight in the war. He really can only use his voice and his physical presence in order to be the next head of the clan. Now, I really want to reiterate that Ellen really is the best person from what we can see of everything so far. She is the best person to be the next head of the MacKenzie clan, but she is not going to get this position because she is a woman. I would be curious to see if she does advocate for something like that, or if she makes it known that she's influencing her husband, who is making the decisions for the clan or whatever the situation is. I don't really know how this is going to turn out or what her role and everything going forward is going to be, but she definitely is an interesting character because she has the smarts to lead the clan. She's simply born in the wrong time period where she cannot do that. Okay, so the next key moment is the Grants versus the MacKenzies versus the Frasers. So we know that Ellen is a pawn in this battle. Her brothers are using her to form alliances with other men by offering her as a potential wife. So this is basically them setting up an arranged marriage for their sister. This is problematic because Red Jacob told Ellen that she did not have to be married. She could remain unmarried and she would still be provided and protected and cared for. However, her brother Colm is going back on this because, one, he staged this situation with Ellen and Dougal and Malcolm Grant. He basically goaded his brother into going after Malcolm Grant when they couldn't find Ellen. They had been seen walking together, Ellen and Malcolm Grant, earlier in the day, and so because they can't find Ellen, they assume that Malcolm must be doing something crazy with her, and the protection is necessary, it's valid in the situation. However, they jumped to conclusions, and Colm manipulated the situation to get Dougal to do something crazy, which is how this whole situation became even more escalated. They were already trying to fight for their family's survival, and they took a huge risk of offending the Grants, and now they have to make up for it, which leads to Ellen being offered as some sort of prize, even though this is not something that she wants for herself. And this is going to create problems because we know that at this point, Ellen and Brian have met. They are really kind of enamored with each other. They haven't really seen each other frequently from what I've seen so far between episodes 1 and 3. but you can understand that there's just intense longing and this love that they have for each other, even though they haven't spent that much time together. So Brian doesn't take the news well that Ellen is betrothed to someone else, and it's actually Murtaugh who tells him, because Murtaugh was the one who was pursuing Ellen, or at least wanted to, and so he's venting about not being able to pursue Ellen without realizing that the person that Ellen wants is Brian. So I think that this is super funny that he hadn't told Murtaugh that, hey, you know, I have a chance with her, you don't, like, back off, but thank you for the information. So what Brian does with this information is he tells his father, Lord Lovett, and he says, hey, you know, the Grants are aligning with the MacKenzies. There's going to be a marriage between Ellen MacKenzie and Malcolm Grant. We can't let this happen. The Grants are supposed to be our allies. And so Lord Lovett takes great offense to this, and he's basically trying to figure out how to stop this alliance from happening. And the solution here is to ruin Ellen's reputation, so to basically make her look like she's sleeping around or like her virtue isn't intact. And for a woman in this time period, this would be a huge stain on their reputation. And Brian, he is trying to stop the wedding, but he doesn't realize that his dad wants to take it this far, and he tries to object, but his dad is like, no, I don't care about them. They've ruined me. I'm going to ruin them. I'm not going to have compassion for that family over this family, and so on. And so Brian has really stepped in it and possibly gone a little bit too far in trying to prevent this marriage. Okay, so this is where we're going to get into some spoilers. The third key moment is when Claire's parents show up. So I was a little bit confused because we start in maybe episode 1 or 2, and we already see Henry as being well integrated into this time period and this family. And I did notice that he talked differently, but I didn't really understand the whole backstory or who he was supposed to be. Then we get the flashback of showing him in like 1917. He's with Julia, they're kissing, they have a car, and so we're instantly transported to a different time period. And then what we see happening is that they get married and all of this stuff. They're driving. The car has some sort of accident because I think there's like a horse or a cart in front of them. They don't see it, and so they end up in the river or whatever type of water it is. And they end up by those pillars or rocks where basically people go to time travel. And Julia had a ring on that had a gemstone in it. And I didn't realize this at first, but we see her walking towards those pillars, and then we hear that famous buzzing sound, and then she's just gone. She screams, and then she's gone. And then Henry's looking for her, and he can't find her. And I was really confused because it seemed like he should have been able to find her, since it seemed like he was somehow transported to the same time period, like basically right after her. So I don't know why they weren't able to find each other, because I don't know how soon after she got there she wandered off to find help, because we do see her kind of waking up, and I don't know if she got to the new time period, walked around for a little bit, and then fell asleep, or if she kind of entered that new time period already asleep and not realizing how much time has passed. I'm not 100% sure. But I do want to get into the backstory of how Claire and Henry even met. So we are shown that Henry was a soldier in World War I. We're able to see all of these chaotic war scenes, people fighting for their lives, bombs being dropped, people screaming, really chaotic. We see Henry wanting to save this guy who's trapped kind of like out on the battlefield. He really wants to bring that soldier home because this is a young soldier, and he thinks that at the very least, even if this kid doesn't survive, the mother should be able to bury the body. The boy should be able to return home. He goes against his orders, and he goes out onto the battlefield to get the guy and bring him back, and then the guy dies shortly after that happened. And what I really like about this is they are showing Henry's influence and power, because one, he disobeyed a direct order to do the right thing, and then also when his boss basically said, hey, you know, I should discipline you, I should send you home, all of Henry's men are staring at the guy like they're unhappy, and the guy realizes like, hey, you know, I need to chill, I can't do all of this. His men are gonna do whatever to me. They really back up this guy. So this is already setting the stage for the power and influence that Henry has as a soldier in World War I. So now, how does Julia fit into this? Julia was working, I don't want to say the mailroom, but basically she was responsible for reading and redacting letters that the soldiers were sending to their family members, to other people, that sort of thing. And so she comes across Henry's letter to his brother, and she ends up writing him back, and they basically have this Dear John type of relationship where they just write back and forth to each other. And then they do make plans to meet up, and that's when they actually meet. And the scene where they met, I'm not sure where that was filmed, but the location reminded me of something from One Day, the Netflix movie. And I don't know if this is like a famous location in England, in London, whatever, but the location did look familiar to me. So if you have any insight on that, please let me know in the comment section. But anyway, so they meet, they get married, they go on this drive, and when they go on this drive, Claire's already born, and we know that Julia is pregnant, and then they end up in that situation where they time travel. And why it's important to acknowledge that Julia and Henry did not die is because Claire grew up thinking that her parents died. It's not until maybe the last episode or two of Outlander season 7 that we find out that Claire comes across 2 little girls who are singing a song that her mother sang to her when she was younger. And this song would have only been around in the 1900s. It wasn't around in the 1700s. So Claire instantly picks up on this and says, hey, where did you learn that song? My mother sang that song to me. Nobody in this time period would know this song, and so she's realizing and putting the pieces together that something happened to her parents. They may have time traveled instead of passing away from an accident. And while we're talking about Julia, I do want to add how crazy it is that she looks so similar to Claire. I actually at first thought this was like Claire when she was younger, but then I realized that it was Claire's parents that we were seeing the love story of. I didn't really read too much about what the Blood of Blood was going to be about, but I knew that it was going to be set in an earlier time period. I just didn't know how much earlier. And so it's really cool to see how well they tried to match the younger actors to the people that we know from Outlander. So now going into my 4th point, Julia is sold to the Fraser family to pay a debt. So this is really crazy because the idea of selling people, we've been talking about slavery in my last couple of videos that I've been doing, and it's really crazy the idea of selling people to pay a debt. Like they just took this random stranger from the street, saw, hey, she's valuable for whatever reason. Maybe it was because she was English, she wasn't from there. They basically kidnap her, and then they say, hey, take this woman, free us of our debts, that sort of thing, and this is all okay. So this is really crazy that we can even do stuff like this. And I know that we're talking about a fictional show, and we're also talking about a completely different time period, but it is crazy to see something like that happen. And while Julia is there, she realizes, hey, I'm not a maid. I can't do whatever they're expecting me to do. I don't belong here. I need to find my husband, because when she was initially trying to get help, she was trying to explain the situation. She didn't realize that she was in a different time period. I was confused that she didn't pick up on how they were in a different time period based on the fact that the people were using a horse and a cart when they were just driving a car. And I don't know if people were still using horses and carriages and stuff like that in 1917. Yes, maybe in rural areas, but I thought that she could have used a little bit more context clues to figure out that things were different. But again, if she's never been to that area where she was, she may not have known what to look for in terms of to figure out what was different. Like, for example, if you know that a building's here in 1900s, but you know that it's not there wherever you are, you're gonna be like, hey, what happened to the building? So I was expecting her to have those sort of interactions or conversation and trying to piece together where she was. And I also don't know if Henry picked up on this, because we see him discovering the rock where she left a message. He's following the direction that she pointed him in, and he ends up in this, like, I guess, town, this tavern where there's a bar of people and it's all men. He's asking if anyone has seen Julia, and he comes across Malcolm Grant, and he doesn't have any money to pay for anything. Malcolm Grant helps him out, and then we see Henry looking at these papers pinned to the wall, and I don't think we saw enough to actually read what was going on. And then obviously the scene flashed to a conversation that Malcolm was having with his people, so maybe that whole time Henry was reading the papers to figure out what was going on and all of that stuff. And he ends up, because Malcolm paid for his drink, he ends up telling him a tip about the papers or the conversation that people are having, and he says, hey, make sure that the deed is done correctly or something like that. And Malcolm's like, hey, what do you mean? So they take great offense to this because he's interjecting himself into the affairs. They're threatening to kill him. He explains what he means by the comment about the paperwork, and then he's taken to the Grant house and he has to explain what he means. And basically what they're saying is that yes, they're signing over these properties to you, but you actually aren't getting anything from the properties, and there's something about the language of the paperwork that is not going to benefit the Grants. And so Then he also explained, hey, whoever your advisor is, he's stealing from you. There's something weird about what he said. And I guess they picked up on this already, but they just beat that guy based on what Henry is saying. And then Henry becomes the new advisor to the Grant family. And this was a good move on Henry's part. He doesn't really have much choice if we're being honest, but this was a good move because one, he gave them great advice that they valued. And then he was able to secure himself a prominent position with a prominent family and used their resources in order to find Julia, because if he rejected the offer, he would have been on his own. He's English and he has no means of surviving in this time period. So he realizes, hey, I have to accept their help and I need to use this as a way to kill two birds with one stone. Now, let's get back to Julia. So she is discovering, hey, I'm in the wrong time period. King George V is not in power. King George I is in power. We're in 1714. What's going on? What am I even doing here? And so she's realizing how bad the situation is for her. She has to adapt into her new role as a maid, so she's in completely different circumstances than Henry is. Henry has easily found himself a prominent position, a powerful position, and she is relegated to being a maid despite how well educated she is and how valuable she is in terms of everything that she's been able to do being a woman from the 20th century. And at first, Julia kind of goes along with the program, but she's also trying to figure out how she can escape. And so we do see her running away, and we see Brian coming across her, and she's basically like, hey, let me go. I need to find my husband. He's like, no, there's a storm coming. You're not going to survive. And plus, my dad is just going to send his henchmen after you because this is a matter of pride. And so the guy does approach her. They take her back, and Lord Lovett is interrogating her, trying to figure out why she's trying to leave, trying to figure out why she's so disobedient and all of this stuff. And so she's really struggling with the power and the gender differences in this time period. And we also saw Claire struggle with that. And Claire was super annoying because she really did not understand, like, hey, you're a woman, yes, but in this time period, you can't do all of that stuff you were doing in the 1900s. And so she's having to learn the hard way that she can't behave the way she did in the 20th century in these time periods. And we see them threatening to beat her. I think they were going to punch her 20 times. And we see Brian step in and say, hey, I tried to help her escape, blah, 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 blame me. And so he gets lashed a bunch of times. And then this is where we find out that the woman who is helping Julia get acclimated to her new circumstances, she's basically the head maid, and her name is Miss Porter. We actually find out that she's Brian's mother. And so what she tells Julia is, these are your new circumstances. You have no money. You need to just get along with the program. And then you also need to stay away from Lord Lovett because he's creepy. And we know that she knows he's creepy because they have a son together and all of that weird stuff. And to kind of tie things into the storyline, we have Henry again in this prominent position, and this is after Dougal has assaulted Malcolm and that family when they were leaving the gathering. And so Henry is able to use his position with the Grant family to kind of negotiate some sort of deal with the MacKenzie family to kind of make this situation right. And so we know that they propose, okay, we'll let Ellen marry Malcolm because Malcolm liked Ellen anyway. And so on paper, this is a good match because Malcolm seems like a nice guy. He seems gentle. There are other people that Ellen could be forced to marry who would be way horrible. Like, for instance, if she had to marry Lord Lovett, that would be really crazy and awful. So I don't mind her getting paired up with Malcolm. However, I know that her and Brian have a thing at this point. And what I really like is that Henry, he's been looking for Julia all this time, and I don't actually know how much time has passed. I think maybe a month or 2 months have passed at this point since they've been time traveled to this new world. And what I like is that Ned is really paying attention. He is really trying to navigate all of the political drama within the MacKenzie family. He's trying to get the brothers on board to not divide the power so that they don't weaken their own position and allow somebody else to become the new laird of the MacKenzie clan. And so he realizes, hey, Henry's asking all of these questions. He's asking about this woman. And so he uses that information to get Henry to take the offer of a proposal of a marriage between Ellen and Malcolm to, as Isaac Grant, who is Malcolm Grant's father, and he also says, hey, you know, I can help you find the woman that you're looking for. And so Henry is getting closer to finding Julia, and what's crazy is we know that Henry and Julia are not that far apart at all. I don't know how far Lord Lovett's house or Brian Fraser's house is from where the MacKenzie family stay, but there's a lot of integration as far as intermingling with these different families, so we know that Julia is not that far away, and it's just a matter of time before Henry finds her, and when he finds her, what exactly will the circumstances be? This leads me into point 5. So Julia plans to sleep with Lord Fraser or Lord Lovett. Okay, so why is this even happening? So we know that when Henry and Julia were last together, they were talking about a pregnancy. So Julia has time traveled to the 1700s and she's pregnant. And so she's in this new circumstance where she's a maid, she is not afforded the same luxuries and opportunities that she had back in the early 1900s, so she's in a completely different position. And so Miss Porter actually picks up on the fact that she's pregnant, and she tries to tell her, hey, you know, you are unmarried, you're a maid, this is going to be a huge stain on your reputation, Lord Lovett is not going to want this baby here, you need to figure out what to do, and the solution is to abort your baby. And so Julia's like, hey, you know, I don't need this, I'm not doing this, whatever. And so she's lying and denying that she's pregnant, but she does have to figure out a way to navigate this pregnancy, because one, if she does become visibly pregnant and she continues to carry the baby, that's going to make her work duties more difficult. And then what is going to happen to her as a woman who is pregnant and unmarried in this time period? Additionally, we know that Lord Lovett is really obsessed with Julia. He basically is trying to bed her, and this is not going to go well. And so it's just a matter of time before he assaults her. And so she is very smart, and she says, hey, you know, I can actually get out of this situation. She's writing letters to Henry that we don't even know if those letters are going to get to him. And then she's also having to come to terms with her circumstances. And she realizes that she can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Lord Lovett is already after her. She doesn't want to abort her baby, so the best thing that she can do in this situation is offer herself to Lord Lovett. And I get why she's doing this. One, she can say that that baby is Lord Lovett's baby. I don't know if they're going to be too picky or concerned about the time frame. He probably will end up claiming that baby as her son based on how she's playing this, but I'm also really upset that she's playing it this way because we know how close Henry is to her, and it's just a matter of time before he finds her and tries to claim her, and he will have the power to do that because of his position within the Grant family and his budding relationship with Ned. And so I'm disappointed that she's going this way, but I completely understand it because she needs to do what's best for her in this situation based on what she knows. We, the viewer, know how close she is to finding Henry, but she doesn't know that. And so I think that if she doesn't want to get rid of her baby, this really is the best thing that she can do for herself in this situation. Now, I don't know how Henry is going to take it when he finds all of this out. Alrighty, so we have a lot happening in the first 3 episodes of Blood of My Blood, and I'm super excited to be watching the rest of this series. I am curious to see where everything is going to go. Who is this baby that Julia is going to give birth to? Who is that we know in the Outlander series, or at least have heard of in the Outlander series? I'm super curious to find out what is going to happen from here, and what will happen when Henry and Julia meet up again in this new time period. I'm also interested in seeing what happens with Ellen and Brian. I know that I believe that they are Jamie Fraser's parents. I just don't know how that relationship plays out. And I do want to see what happens with the MacKenzie clan. Are they going to be united? Is there going to be more infighting between Colum and Dougal? What is going to happen with that? I'm also interested in learning who else are time travelers from this time period, who else has traveled from the early 1900s to back to the 1700s and vice versa, because I know that they've been talking about Claire and Jamie and how they kind of like have a past connection or something like that. And so I'm really curious as to what was it that drove Julia to this particular time period and all of that good stuff. So I'm definitely looking forward to the upcoming episodes so that we can figure all of this out. Again, I have not read the books and I don't really want to read them. I don't want to spoil the rest of the series because it really is nice not knowing what happened. I did the same thing with Game of Thrones. I didn't read the books, and so I was really just relying on the next episode to clue me in on everything that happened, and I'm looking forward to doing the same with Blood of My Blood. Alrighty, so that's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.